Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for this presentation. This is part 2 of a 3-part training that we usually offer to new officers, supervisors, clerks, and treasurers at the spring short course events that we do each year. The first part of this covered the basics of what a township government is and where it fits within state government, some basics of where your powers and duties come from. And today's will focus on the open meeting law and some contracting issues. Okay, so we'll get started. Please feel free to submit questions as we go. If I can, I will pick these up as they're submitted, but if we get too many, I want to make sure we get through everything, and I'll try to pick the rest up at the end. Okay, so we're going to start with the open meeting law. And the open meeting law is one of the probably more disliked things that town officers have to deal with. And as you learn about this, you may feel you hate it, and I understand that. And it's because when you're a town officer, this puts some obligations on you, and it makes it difficult to do some things. The common complaint is, well, we can't even get anything done. Well, you will be able to. It's just that you are not going to be able to do it by talking to each other directly between meetings, okay? So what you need to understand is this thing applies to townships, it applies to cities, counties, the state executive branch. It does not apply to the legislative branch. The legislature conveniently exempted themselves from the open meeting law, so they don't have to worry about this. And when you hear about legislators going behind closed doors to make decisions, well, it's because they're not subject to this. The purpose of this thing is to make sure that what you do can be seen and heard and understood by the public, okay? And it starts out, it's a pretty short chapter, Chapter 13D, but it starts out saying all meetings must be open to the public, okay? And this is the idea of, this is a piece of Minnesota good government law, okay? Minnesota is, for anybody's complaints, when you stack it up against other states, considered to have generally good government, meaning there's access to citizens, there's recourse if you want information, that kind of thing. Okay, this is one piece of that. And as we talked about in the first part of this, it's based on public trust. You need people to have trust in what you're doing, and even if they disagree with you, understand the process and how you got there. Okay, so all meetings must be open to the public. Great, except that it doesn't tell you when you're having a meeting. You would not know if you read this chapter. Over and over, you wouldn't know when you're having a meeting, okay? And that's where the courts have had to step in. This thing's been around for decades at this point, and the legislature is aware that it doesn't have a definition, and they're okay with that. And it's because the courts have stepped in and said, here's when you're having a meeting, okay? And we'll get to the factors that tell you when you're having a meeting. All right. The intent, though, it always is going to be so that the public is fully informed, not just of the decisions, but of everything leading up to it. And when there is a dispute, when there is a claim against the town for violating this, courts will find in favor of the public. Okay, so it is important to pay attention to. It's also important to understand it applies to the supervisors, because they're the governing body. They're the ones that make the decisions here. It does not apply to the clerk or the treasurer as they carry out their typical duties. Okay? All right, so there's going to be 3 pieces to this, and I'm going to say it a couple times because it's important. You're having a meeting when you have a quorum, having an exchange about public business. Okay, 3 pieces. 1 is a quorum, 2 is having an exchange, and 3 is about public business. If those things are present, you have a meeting, okay? So that first piece is a quorum, all right? Well, a quorum for a board of 3 supervisors is 2, and for 5 it's 3. Okay, some townships have gone to 5 supervisors, so their quorum's a little bit bigger, okay? It applies to the elected officials, meaning the supervisors. But the open meeting law, in order to make sure that no element of government is kind of subdivided down into committees that you can't see, well, it also applies to every subcommittee you make. So if you have a planning and zoning commission, well, the open meeting law applies to that planning and zoning commission too. So if you have that, it's important for the supervisors to tell those folks they appoint what they have to do to post meetings and all that, and understand they can't just get on the phone and start talking between each other. Okay, there's a process we have to follow. So any advisory committee, if you have Parks Committee, Park and Rec, if you have an ad hoc committee, you wanted to appoint some people to go look at an issue, and you appointed them, well, they're a committee under your town government. Open meeting law applies to them. All right? It does not apply to private groups. This is just government. So your church boards, your Boy Scout, Girl Scout councils, your VFWs, anything like that. You don't have to worry about the open meeting law, just with government, all right? So that's pretty straightforward. This is just counting. Two people for a 3-person board, 3 for a 5-person board, all right? That's what makes it difficult. 2 people on a 3-person board, and you've got yourself the quorum, all right? The second piece, again, our 3 pieces were quorum, having an exchange about public business. Okay, so the exchange. This is a back and forth among those supervisors. It's a back and forth by any means. So it could be talking, it could be direct conversation, it could be by phone, by as is popular now, Zoom meeting or whatever electronic means you want to use, emails, text, chat. I don't even put letters up here anymore because no one seems to write letters, but that would be included, of course. And then there's what's called a chain meeting, and that's where a group of supervisors will say, well, we want to have some exchange here, but we know we can't have direct communication, and that would be a meeting, so we're going to send it through the clerk. Okay, so let's say I'm Supervisor A, and I go to the clerk and say, here's what I want you to get across to Supervisor B. Can you tell him, and then ask him what he thinks. What should I do? So the clerk goes and tells Supervisor B, sends my message, and then returns my message. Aren't I so smart? Haven't we just defeated the open meeting law? No, of course not. This thing is construed in favor of the public, and it's not just the letter of the law, but the intent. My intent in that little scenario was to defeat this law. So we would have an open meeting law violation there. That's called a chain meeting. It's the use of third parties to pass your messages along. Okay. One-way communication is not enough here. If I happen to be in the same place as another supervisor, let's say we're a board of 3, and I speak loudly, and I'm not really talking to him in particular or her, and they hear what I say. Well, if they don't engage back and respond, they haven't had an exchange. And that other person didn't invite the communication and couldn't have stopped it. So what we're looking for is a back and forth. Okay, one way is okay, and in that way, sometimes we have supervisors who will send an update to other supervisors. I'm the road manager, and here's what I want you to know. We're doing this because this thing happened, and you should be aware of it in case you get calls. It doesn't ask for a response, and as long as there is none, we're still okay. We haven't had an exchange. Okay. The third piece of this. Okay, so quorum, having an exchange about public business. It's your town business that matters. All right, it's not any business that is your farmer and another supervisor is in your line of work or something like that. You can have exchanges about that. You go to the same church, your kids go to the same school. Go have a conversation, just not about township business, not about public business. Okay, and if you do that and you keep away from town business, you don't have any problem because it's not about your public business. Some supervisors, they misunderstand this and they think they have to run away from each other when they see one another. That, oh, we cannot be in the same place at the same time. The Superman rule. Can't have Clark Kent and Superman in the same room. No, that's not what this is. Okay, it's okay. Have a conversation. At worst, what's going to happen is somebody is going to see you talking, and occasionally that you'll have somebody upset with your township. It's usually not about the open meeting law. It's usually they're upset because you didn't make a decision they wanted you to make. They wanted an extra driveway approach, and you said no, you have one, or you want the other one's not safe. Or there was a land use issue, and they didn't like what you did, whether they were the petitioner or not. Okay. Well, now they may be looking for something to get you in trouble. So they see you talking, and they assume, gosh, it must be about town business. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Okay, they'd still have to prove what did you talk about, what exchange did you have. Okay, so it's okay to be cordial and have a discussion with people, just stay away from public business. If the other person raises it, explain. I'm sorry, I don't want to get myself in trouble, or you, so let's not talk about that subject. Okay. For those of you who are new, and I know we have some experienced officers kind of retaking this, but for those who are new, your more experienced officers may be of the mind that, well, we're too small to worry about that. We don't follow that. No, that's not correct under the law. It doesn't matter how big or small you have. We have a township right now that has 5 people. It has, of course, dwindled. It did not start with 5 people. But it's a very small rural area, okay? This is the most rural of the rural. It applies there the same as it does in White Bear Lake Township, which is over 10,000 people, okay? It's the same law. There's no exception anywhere that says if you're small, you don't have to worry about this, okay? Because the public is deemed to have the same right. And when I say public, we construe that broadly. It's not just people who are your residents or landowners. It's everybody. It is media. It is anybody who wanders in and wants to know something. It could be me. It could be anybody, okay? So take a broad view of that. We don't apply it just based on if you live here or have property here, okay? Those are the 3 basic pieces, okay? There are exceptions. There are exceptions to most rules. We'll get into some exceptions here, okay? But be smart about this. And remember that as inconvenient as it is, that you can't talk to one other supervisor even between meetings. You may feel very differently about this rule if you were not on the town board and if you didn't have trust in the people who are on that town board. Okay, it really depends on where you're sitting and your perspective on whether you like this law. And most of the time, people in your township, they trust you. That's why they put you in this office. Again, this is a matter of trust. Even if they wrote you in by surprise you got this office, it's because they trust you. Okay? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, well, I didn't really know what you were doing, but, I trust you. That's fine, but it only goes so far until one person gets upset by what you did. Please, everybody follows this law. Everybody needs to follow this law. Those who aren't are taking a risk for themselves, and it's a personal risk. Okay? This is one of the few areas where you, as an individual, will have personal responsibility. Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. All right, so I mentioned exceptions. First exception is what's called the site visit exception. This is a nice thing for townships, and it is for townships alone. If your township doesn't have staff that can go in and inspect something and do some kind of site visit, well, this law says you can go out as a board, as a group, and go look at the thing, point out conditions you see so everybody sees the same conditions. Okay? You're not having a meeting. This is not considered a meeting at all because you're not supposed to have any discussion or exchange about what do we do. All right? And when I'm going to go back here a moment because when we talk about exchange, it is not only the final decision. You can't say, well, we made the final decision in an open meeting, therefore all of our discussion before was okay. No, it is absolutely everything leading up to the decision and the decision itself. Okay? So in the site visit idea, you're going to go out and look at it, point out conditions to each other. And then you're going to have to go to an open meeting where you have the discussion about what did you want to do. It's difficult, and usually this comes up with the road tour. Folks right now are going out for road tours in the spring, and they usually get into the same vehicle. Well, they're not supposed to have a meeting in the vehicle. Even if you post it, how does the public get to attend a meeting in a truck? You can't do it, and it's a silly thing to try, okay? So instead, what you want to do is be sure that you're just inspecting, you're looking it over, you take notes. Some townships have a chart of all the roads, like they have a spreadsheet, lists all the roads on them, and the supervisors can fill in their notes, okay? If you want to get out and point to something, that's fine, all right? But if it looks like you have exceeded that, and it looks like, well, gosh, they went out on the road tour, and they came back, and all of a sudden work's being done, but they didn't have a meeting, okay? We can pretty easily show that you must have made a decision as a group in that truck, okay? So where I said it's okay to have chance discussion and things like that with people, it doesn't mean you should assume that you can't get caught. It means you still follow the rules, okay? So the question is define public business. We have one question up. I'll go back one. Public business is town business, something that has to do with the administration of your township, which can be all those decisions the supervisors make, okay? So it's administration of the roads, hiring and firing. It's, are you going to enact an ordinance or follow an ordinance or repeal the thing or change it in some way? It can be, I don't like the potholes on this road. It can be really a wide variety of things, okay? But anything that's about your town as a township, that's our public business, okay? Stay away from all of that, okay? Be cautious. With this, it's a township. There's almost nothing that's a hurry. There shouldn't be a hurry. Welcome to government. Move slowly, okay? It's because we follow a process. And sometimes the process is inconvenient. It's slow on purpose, and we want it to remain that way, okay? You make better decisions when we do things that way. Okay, so be patient. This is a very important aspect of being a town officer. Okay. Next, we have closed meetings. Okay, closed meetings are different than a site visit exception. This is, you're going to have a meeting. You're going to have a full discussion and exchange, and you can make decisions about things. And in the end, you get to exclude the public. And we're going to go to the next slide because we're going to explain several of the exceptions here. Okay, one is the attorney-client privilege. Right? There's some others than what you see up here, but these are the ones most common to townships. First, attorney-client privilege. All right, this is, you have been sued, or you are about to be sued, and you need to get the advice of your attorney. It is not, well, we're not sure what to do, it's a routine question, and we just want to get the attorney's advice first. No, that's not what this one is about. There's a real problem, and you are relying on privilege. Those routine questions, courts have said, you don't get to keep that from the public. You don't have the same privilege that an individual would have. So unfortunately, we're not going to get to take advantage of that. Okay. The second one is an employee review. Now, if you have employees, and I'm not talking about clerk and treasurer who are elected. They're not your employees. All right, they're elected officials. It's not a supervisor who happens to be doing some work on the side. This is, you've hired somebody in. If that's the case, you can close a meeting to review their performance. All right, and there's some rules around that. You'd have to let them know you're going to close the meeting, but if they want it open, you must open it, okay? And at the end, if it does get to be a closed meeting, you still have to give a report to the public of, here's what our summary is. Okay, it's not necessarily detailed, but it's a summary of here's what we talked about, and here's the good or the bad in general, okay? There's a couple questions. I will try to come back to those, okay? The third one, preliminary consideration allegations of wrongdoing. All right. Again, this is with an employee, someone subject to the board's control, and they've done something wrong, and that's the allegation anyway. This exception says you can close the meeting to hear the allegation and decide as a board, are we going to do something? Okay. If you are or are not, it doesn't matter as far as that closed meeting. You hold the closed meeting, you hear the allegation, you decide you're going to pursue discipline or you're not going to pursue discipline. The closed meeting ends with that decision, all right, or hearing the allegation and putting it off till later. This isn't hear the allegation and then we're going to discipline in private. No, we don't get to do that, okay? It's just the starting point, okay? The fourth one, a few townships have to deal with, but some do have union employees, and they have labor negotiations. During those negotiations, you can close for negotiation strategy and to consider offers and that kind of thing, because otherwise you would be at a disadvantage. All right. Last, real estate transactions. It wouldn't make much sense to say we want to sell our property and we're supposed to get fair market value, but let the public also know that, well, we're willing to take this lowest amount. Of course you're going to get the lowest amount. Or if you're buying, well, what's the most we can spend? Conveniently, that's how much that the offer is going to make you pay, okay? So you can close your meeting for this, all right? Again, in the end, you will need to give a report when it comes to the real estate transaction one, okay? And with any of these, any closed meeting, all of them follow a particular procedure. They all start as an open meeting, So the public could show up. They start as an open meeting, and if you go into closed session like this right away, you're going to announce publicly, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a closed meeting, and we're doing it pursuant to this statute. And that's why I gave you statutes on this little list here. You would have to say, we intend to close this meeting at this time pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 3A for an employee review of Bob Smith's employment. He has not requested that the meeting remain open, and we will close at this time. The public is directed to leave. We will summarize the results of this at the next open meeting. Okay, now you can close and do your, whichever one of these it was. You can do the result there, okay? All of them, except for attorney-client privilege, you have to audio record the closed session. But you never take any minutes, okay? Never any minutes of a closed session. No notes, no minutes. And it's because minutes are public always. So what's the point of closing your meeting if somebody can demand the minutes? Likewise, if you have an issue and you have notes, those might be subject to discovery in a lawsuit. Well, don't make minutes, okay? So record, audio record, everything except attorney-client, and you keep that on file, and that's for a judge. You don't share the audio recording. That is not open to the public to get and listen to. It's there for a judge if there's an allegation you did something wrong, all right, during your closed meeting. For example, let's say you closed for the employee review, but you got done, and then you went into, well, which road are we going to have you focus on, employee? And you're just giving direction about what you're going to do. Well, that should have been open. Or, well, as long as we got this closed meeting, we should make this decision about whether we're going to borrow some money rather than just raise taxes. Okay, well, all that should have been an open meeting. And if somebody's upset, they can demand that a judge review your audio. Okay, so audio record, no minutes. You stick to only the business during the closed session that you're supposed to with that exception. You don't exceed it, all right? And then you'd have to reopen the meeting and continue on with your business, okay? So those are the exceptions. You cannot close a meeting to save someone's feelings. It's unfortunate, you know, I'm not being heartless here. There's no exception for that. Sometimes you have to say, no, sorry, we have to pick a contractor. Yes, you're my friend, but you're not the contractor we're going to pick. I have to do it in an open meeting. Okay, you can't vote privately either. This is all open. It's uncomfortable, but it still has to be open. Okay, closed meeting as a term applies to anything where you exclude the public from hearing and seeing what's going on. It doesn't matter what you call it. If you call it executive session or informal meeting or informational meeting or, well, we talked but we didn't really decide anything. Again, it doesn't matter if you decided anything at all. That was never a consideration in the open meeting law. It's, did you have a quorum? Did they have an exchange, a back and forth? And was it about your town business? If the answer to those things are yes, you had a meeting that was supposed to be open to the public with proper notice, okay? All right. I'm checking questions here. Okay, and these appear to be about the road site visit, okay? And so in some cases, are proceedings of a closed meeting discoverable, a real estate transaction? Yes, in some cases, somebody coming after can hear what's going on, but in that real estate example, you have to give a report as a board of what you talked about in the closed session anyway, because it's deemed you only need the closure for the time before the sale is made. Okay, and then you're able to open it back up, and it doesn't matter after the thing is done what people know after that. Okay. So this was a way to manage. There's a question from Tony. Should you have separate supervisors with different responsibilities to alleviate discussion? Yes, absolutely. Tony, you've hit upon the way that you manage to get things done, as people say, without having a meeting. You're going to delegate in advance. Here's what you should do. Supervisor A, we're going to make you the road manager. And employees or contractors report to you. You give them their direction for what they're going to do. If a road is washed out and it needs to be closed immediately, you go do that. Okay. You could also give them a small amount of money to spend for things that have to be done that can't wait. Okay, so you need a contractor to come out and remediate that washout for safety. Okay, they have maybe some amount of money to do that. Or the township's equipment. You have a tire that goes. Well, are you going to wait till another meeting to fix the tire? No, this is probably something you can just authorize up to some amount of money where the supervisor can go get that done. Okay, but that person can't exceed their authority. Okay, but that's what we want to do to make sure that you get things done and you don't have to have any exchange. Okay, likewise with if the plow's going out, you can't have a phone call in the morning to decide if the plows are going out because you had some snow. You have to have a policy. When should these things go out? Or leave it to one supervisor and trust that that person is going to make an okay decision. Okay, maybe not your decision, but an okay decision. All right. And then we had one from Wendy. If someone's complaining, do we ask them to come? And I might need help with this because I'm having trouble. I can't see the whole question on this, Joseph. We'll come back to that. I'll let Joseph take a look. But I can only see, I'm sorry, part of the question today. Last week I was able to see the whole thing. All right. Emergencies. Okay. Emergencies are another exception. Emergencies are pretty straightforward. It means you have an imminent threat to the health, welfare, or safety of the public, meaning there's a problem. It's right now. We're not speculating about whether it could be an issue. It's clearly a problem. And for townships, this almost always means a weather-related event. I don't think I've ever come across an emergency for a township that was not related to a weather condition. Okay, so in that case, yes, you can hold a meeting. It's not a closed meeting. It's just that if you need to be out there on the side of the road to talk about what to do with this washout or culvert that failed, okay, or something like this, well, yeah, you go out and have that discussion. You're not excluding the public. If somebody stops by and wants to listen, they can, okay? But you're going to go deal with it to make it safe. That's okay to do. Again, going back to Tony's question, you could just have somebody authorized to do the basic steps, right? Now, that means you may have a meeting at 2:30 in the morning. Clerks who often take minutes and all that, you do not need to get out of bed and go to the roadside at 2:30 in the morning. Somebody else can take minutes of these, but minutes are critical because they tell the story to anyone, including judges. Here's why we had to do this, Judge. Here's the condition. We had this problem. It was a safety risk, so we had an emergency meeting to deal with this, and this is all we did. We just dealt with that problem. Great. Somebody draft up the basics of what was said, why you had to have the emergency meeting, and somebody turns them into minutes, and that's okay, right? But explain why you couldn't do the normal notice and all this stuff. And again, remember part one, we talked about how there's that separation of powers. Well, because of separation of powers, if you put it in your minutes, courts are supposed to defer to some extent, and they should here. If you're saying, we've done this, we've recognized this law, but here's our reasons why we couldn't follow it, courts are going to give you the benefit of the doubt on that, okay? All right, so it looks like my display on one of my displays was messed up. Joseph, thank you. So Wendy, someone asked about fixing a road and is complaining, do we ask them to come to the next meeting of the board, or is it best to not talk about public business? Well, as an individual, you could certainly talk to somebody, okay? Remember, it's not talking about public business with the public. This is between supervisors. So if two supervisors are standing there and some constituent comes up and say the supervisors were not talking about town business properly, they were not discussing that because it wasn't a called meeting, and that individual starts talking about this, well, the safe thing is probably for one of them to say, oh, well, because of the meeting law, we can't talk about that together. Why don't you talk to him about it, and you can come talk to me separately, or I'll hear it from the meeting, okay? That's, again, cautious. Or they both listen, but only one responds. But if it looks like they're both responding to this thing, okay, now it looks like they're having an exchange, and it's through this third party. So the cautious approach is, one of you keep your mouth shut or wander away. Okay, that's probably the better option. Okay. I got another question. What about a cemetery walkthrough? Does the public have to be there? No, this could be a site visit exception as long as you're not trying to have an exchange or make decisions about what to do or something that's the discussion of how you get to a decision. Okay. If you need an inspection, you could go as a group, but all you're going to do is look at this. I want everybody to see this so I can talk about it later. Okay? It's a very limited exception, and it's frustrating for some people. And truth is, I'm sure people get in the truck on the road tour, and they exceed that. They shouldn't, but they do. Okay? So be cautious about that. If anything, go out on your own. View these things on your own and come back to a meeting. Okay? All right. Question, remote meetings per a new document. Public packets are to be available to the public. Public packets are, I'm not going to get in too deep, that's into the weeds, but basically any document that the board gets, the public is supposed to be able to see. During a normal meeting where you can be in person, there is at least one set of all the documents that the board got beforehand or that they're expecting to see during the meeting, and that's called the public packet. During this time where we're doing telephone meetings because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's difficult with the public packet. And some are able to do that, put it on a website or something, but others, the best practice is if somebody wants to see a document, explain, well, I'm sorry, we didn't have a means to do this, but we can't meet in person. We will send you a copy of the document, and then you find a way to do that, okay? But that's, in short, what the public packet is, because they have to see and hear everything in the meeting, which includes the documents, right? Otherwise, you could pass notes between each other and communicate out of the site that way, or people wouldn't know what it is we're looking at if you're on the board, okay? So public packet, all that stuff that the board gets to see, the public needs to see too. Okay. All right, notice. So here's how the notice works. All right, for a regular meeting, which is any meeting you put on your schedule, usually it's like the second Tuesday, the third Thursday, whatever it is that you guys set up. All right, that gets filed with the clerk, and then that's your regular meeting schedule. During that time, you don't need any other extra notices. No publishing is required here, okay? It's only posting when you do anything. And we recommend that as a best practice, you post notice for the year of all your regular meetings on your posting board, and you're supposed to have a posting place. Most townships have a board somewhere, okay? And it's got to be some place where the public can come up and see it without, for example, shouldn't be behind a locked door, okay? They should be able to wander up and see it. Now, if you don't have a posting board, the door of your regular meeting place is your posting place by law. So if you happen to not have a town hall and you don't have a posting board, and you hold the meetings in the clerk's home, much to the disappointment of the clerk's spouse, their front door just became the public posting place until you find something else, okay? So get a public posting board if you can, all right? That's a regular meeting, all right? Special meetings. Anything outside the normal meeting schedule, the regular meeting schedule, is called a special meeting. For that, we do need different notice. You need to post. It's not to publish, just post. Notice of the time, date, place, and purpose. And by purpose, we mean what are the things you want to address? And it's because you're limited to those topics during a special meeting. The regular meeting, anything and everything is fair game, whether you use an agenda or not. But with a special meeting, you're limited, okay? So you put all the things you need to do. If you skip something and it's not there on the meeting day, or you can't get it posted with enough time, you're out of luck. You can't do that business that day, okay? There's a provision where people can mail or get delivered special notice. Okay, these are special notice typically for special people, meaning they're very concerned. Sometimes it's media outlets, but a lot of times it's just somebody who's kind of the self-appointed town watchdog, and they want to know, well, in that case, you have to mail them notice of the special meeting, okay? Now, the statute says you have to post or deliver that notice at least 3 days before the date of the meeting. And obviously, 3 means 5. That's not so obvious, but here's why. 3 days before the date of the meeting. Well, that means we don't count the day of the meeting. We have 3 plus 1. We're up to 4 days. And then there's another statute that says when the period given by law is less than 7 days, you can't count the first day you do it. So now we're up to 5, okay? So in general, 5 days posted notice, and you are okay to have your special meeting, okay? Last, we have continued meetings. A continued meeting could be either starting as a regular meeting or starting as a special meeting. It's just a way of you don't adjourn. You're going to come back for the same meeting, all right? This is a great tool to use. If you need to come back the next day or a couple days later, of course, you don't have time to post a meeting with only a few days. So instead of adjourn, someone makes a motion to continue this meeting to a specific date, time, and location. Okay? Now, the board can come back at that date, time, and location and carry on just as they did before, and it's considered part of the same meeting. So if you continued a regular meeting, you come back and it's a regular meeting. You continue on with any and all business you want to do. If you continued from a special meeting, you're stuck with the same special meeting items you did before. Okay? And for those who are criminal masterminds out there, you cannot just continue every meeting so you never have to post notice. Don't try to do that. It'll just get you in trouble. Okay? So, next, penalties. Here's what we care about. Why should I do this? Well, it's because there's a personal penalty. Again, it's a penalty on those that it applies to. So supervisors, and then anyone on a board or commission appointed by the township. It is a personal liability because the legislature said, this is so important, we're going to make you do it. We're going to make sure you get this done. Okay? So it's up to a $300 fine per violation. And if there's 3 violations, you lose your office. And you may be thinking, fantastic, I found a way to get out of this thing that they stuck me with. But unfortunately, the way this statute is worded, it has to be 3 violations in 3 separate cases. So you have to learn, not learn from your first 2 mistakes, but maybe by the 3rd. So it's really kind of hard to get dismissed from office for this. Okay. The things you happen to do in a closed meeting, they're not invalid. So if you improperly close the meeting or didn't have an open meeting, all the stuff that happened is still valid. It's just that now somebody can come complain that you did this incorrectly. Okay, $300, this cannot be paid by the township. That will be paid by the individual, and it's not always just one allegation. There was a case a couple of years back in the city of Victoria, west of the Twin Cities, that there were some 35 violations alleged against 5 city council members. Okay, well, not all of them were proven, but I think a dozen or so were, right? Well, a dozen times your $300, you're going to write a pretty big check. Okay, the other thing that stings more, the court may award attorney's fees up to $13,000 per party. Okay, this is to make sure that individuals don't feel that they have to take a loss on an attorney just to enforce their right to understand what's going on in their local government. Okay, that could possibly be paid for by the township or an insurer, but it's not always. And of course, you cannot vote on whether the town pays your legal fee because that'd be a conflict of interest. Okay, so this is why you should be terribly careful with the open meeting law. When in doubt, just wait. Nothing is an emergency except the things we just talked about. Okay, everything can wait. It's okay. This is government, and you slow down. Okay, so that is the open meeting law. We're going to switch gears here. When you're making decisions, as a public body, you're there to serve the public. Remember, this is public trust. They put you there for a reason. Make decisions. Don't put them off. You're really kind of obligated to give people an answer. Even if they're upset about it, give them an answer, give them some finality. Okay. Now, sometimes you have to act within a particular amount of time. For example, those of you who do planning and zoning, there's something called the 60-day rule. It's a state law that says when an applicant submits a request for a decision on certain things, that body has 60 days to give an answer. And planning and zoning is one of those things. Okay. Now, if they're just asking you to change an ordinance, no, the 60-day rule doesn't apply. If they want you to upgrade or do something to the road, we're not in a 60-day rule situation. Okay, it's very limited things it applies to, but it's serious because if you do that planning and zoning and you don't make your decision in 60 days, they get what they asked for, and that may upset people in the area. Okay, when you act, you're going to act in one of 3 ways as a town board. 1 is the motion, 2 is resolution, 3 is by ordinance, and those are listed in order of formality, least to most. A motion is very simple. It's a verbal action reflected in the minutes, and the minutes are the official record of your meetings. Okay? It doesn't have to be, I move this. It can be informal. I'd like to do this. That's a motion. Now we're going to have discussion to decide whether other people agree with me. Okay? A resolution is a more formal way of putting something into a motion. Okay, you're just taking it into a written format. It's a document that says, here's the township, whereas this, and you have a series of whereas statements. And each of those is a, we believe this to be true. That's what a whereas statement is. Okay, and then at the bottom, be it therefore resolved, meaning here's our action, here's our decision based on all these things that add up above us. Here's our decision. Okay, a few things you must do by resolution. If you want to accept donations, You have to do it by resolution, oddly. Don't know why. That's just what the statute says. Okay. If you want to give money to certain groups, which it's limited, you may have to do it by resolution. Okay. Last is an ordinance, and an ordinance is the most formal. It's a local law. Okay. It has the most process, and for that, we look at a statute. You consider an ordinance and you pass it, let's say, in your board. Well, you're not done. You now have to give published notice of the ordinance. Now, before I said with a meeting, you don't do published notice. It's just posted notice. Okay. Here's one of those cases where you have to publish the ordinance. You have to publish the text or summary of it that tells people what's prohibited and the penalties. Okay, because you can make penalties for this. You could have parking ordinances. You can have animal ordinances, noise ordinances. Now, you may have difficulty enforcing some of those. Okay, weight ordinances for your roads, all that kind of stuff. Right, but you have to publish it. And then you also have to put a copy in your town ordinance book, and that should be in the county law library. Every county's got one. You go there should be a set of books for all the municipalities in the county. Usually the clerk puts a copy into that book, all right? And then the clerk makes an affidavit. I did this thing. I put it there. So if somebody tears it out, you can still say, yeah, look, we did it right, okay? And now you can enforce your ordinance, okay? Question, who does the public bring up and report a penalty to? Well, it depends on what it is. If it's the open meeting law, it's a civil claim. I'm sorry, I should go back. The open meeting law is a civil matter. It is not a criminal matter. The advantage to that being if you violate, you're not a criminal. Hooray. The disadvantage being based on the what you need to prove a violation. As everybody knows from Law and Order, you have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt to convict somebody of a crime, which is true. Okay, that's our highest standard of evidence. So it's the most difficult. As a civil matter, with the open meeting law, all it takes is preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not. 50.1% likely that the judge or jury believes you violated, and it's a civil violation. Okay, but the open meeting law is brought by individuals. It's I suppose it could be brought by a county attorney, but I don't recall any county ever doing that. Okay, of course the county is subject to this too. All right, so they're not wild about enforcing these things. Okay, it's more of a public issue or a private issue, so to speak. Okay, if it's a criminal matter, they'd report it to the sheriff or county attorney or the state auditor. Okay. Last on our slide here, no individual authority. This is terribly important, in particular for supervisors. You, as an individual, have no authority, even if you're the chair. In fact, there's only one thing I can think of that the chair gets to do. The chair has the wonderful responsibility and power of receiving the feet of dead animals. Okay, the gopher bounty. The gopher bounty statute says that the chair of the town board shall receive the gopher feet. Lucky you. It's not a great power, okay? And it's because the chair is just another supervisor. Chair is just another supervisor. They're not a supervisor plus or anything like that. They run meetings, they keep order, they move things along, but they don't decide the agenda. They don't decide we're going to table something. They don't have any individual spending authority. They don't, by default, manage employees. Okay, you're a group. Your voters put you there as a group to manage things. They didn't select one with a couple others to advise and consent here. Okay, so even as a new supervisor, you have all the same powers as those other folks do. All right, and please exercise it. You don't owe them less because you're new. That just means, as we talked about in part one, you ask questions and you find out the answers. It's not to be obstinate. It's to learn what you can do and can't and how you should do things. Maybe they can do it. They just got to do it a different way. Okay? Raise those things, and it's fair to assert that. Try to do it right, okay? And everybody will be better off. All right, next big topic, municipal contracting law. Townships contract, of course. It's a big piece of what they do. In this law, I'm a little more confident you could read this thing and understand it, okay? It's pretty straightforward, all right? It's a way of giving some uniformity to local governments and the state in doing things, and it protects public funds, okay? Now, if you'll see the second bullet point here, it says what it applies to, because it doesn't apply to everything. Right? It applies to contracts for the sale or purchase, so it's buying or selling, of supplies, materials, equipment, or the rental thereof, or construction, alteration, repair, or maintenance of real or personal property. In other words, buying or selling stuff. All right? What it does not apply to. It does not apply to any contract for what are called professional services, engineering services. Okay? Road engineer, hydrological engineer, doesn't apply to them. All right? Architect for a building, doesn't apply. Lawyers, it doesn't apply to accountants or CPAs you may have working for you. They're not a contract for sale or purchase of supplies, materials, or equipment, right? Okay. All right. It is going to apply, though, to buying and selling all the stuff. All right. It does not apply to sale or purchase of the real estate. Notice it just says construction, alteration, repair, and maintenance of real or personal property. Okay. Well, real property, it doesn't say buying or selling of itself. Okay. So those are kind of the boundaries that we're working with when we talk about the contracting law. It works based on 3 buckets. All right. 3 boxes here, from lowest to highest. If a contract is under $25,000, we call this direct negotiation. You're going to have the least need to do any kind of competitive process. Okay? At this level, the town board, remember, as a group, because there's no individual authority, they decide as a group, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to make a contract with. We don't have to get competitive anything. We call somebody up and we like their price and it's under $25,000, you go ahead. Okay? You don't need to do anything else. And I should say these numbers are good faith estimates. All right? So we're going to do some electrical work around the town hall. We expect it'll be well under $25,000. Okay? We're going to do road work. Well, that's getting a bit bigger. If we add up all of our road work for the year, well, now we're expecting it to be $160,000. Okay? Well, that would put us in the middle box. All right? That's our good faith expectation based on past practice. All right? So let's take that example. We've got a $160,000 estimate we think it'll probably be. Of course, you don't know. We don't know what the snowfall is going to be. Okay? And a lot of that works on hourlies, but it's just the best guess. So in that middle level, we think it's going to be $160,000. It drops into that box. Contracts between $25,000 and $175,000. You have to do with either sealed bids, which is the top level, or the more convenient and way better to do, 2 written quotes. Okay? At least 2 written quotes means you have to try and get in writing 2 quotes from vendors. And I'm going to make a distinction. Quotes are quotes and bids are bids, and we don't mistake the terms, okay? Because to the industries, bids mean something specific, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, quotes mean something else. With quotes and direct negotiation, there is no requirement that you take the lowest quote or bid, and there may in fact be very good reason why you don't. Let's say on that road issue one, you typically are on 150, 160, and you're going to seek 2 written quotes. Okay. And let's say you get 2. One of them is remarkably low. It's only $80,000. It's half price, and the other one is the guy you've been working with, and it's expected. Well, it's so cheap, you think, how can you not take this up? Until you realize that company has not actually got the equipment to do what you need, and they don't have a plan to get it. Instead of professional equipment, they've got an F-150 with a blade. Well, it's probably not sufficient to do your roads. That's why it's so cheap. You're not going to get the service you need, okay? So in that case, you could say, no, we're going to take the more expensive one. And you explain the good things about the one you selected. Never anything bad about the one you didn't, okay? Because we don't want defamation or anything like that going on. Say the good things about what you select, all right? Now, when I say at least 2, it's possible you could only get 1. Because if you can't force anybody to give you a quote, all right, you, in that case, reflect on your minutes. We tried, we couldn't get 2, okay, and then you take what's left, all right. Last and highest one is the most difficult one. It's contracts over $175,000. Again, expected to be. Must be let on sealed bid. Sealed bid requires that you take a process of writing specs, okay, and we'll get into our next one here. You're going to have to write specs, you're going to have to publish these things, you're going to have to get them in, consider them, and you're going to have to take the lowest responsible bidder. It has the most process, it's the most difficult to deal with, and that's why a lot of townships try to avoid it. Okay? And we'll get to some ways you may be able to do that. Okay? With the contract specs, that's where you start. You look at whether it's a piece of machinery. Let's say you need a new grader, a new plow or something, and let's say it's over $175. Okay? Well, in that case, you can go and look around and get an estimate of, well, we think it's going to be about this because we can kind of see the list prices, all right? good faith basis, we know it's going to be more than 175. Well, now we need to write some specifications. And these have to be specific enough, there's a balance here, specific enough to get what you want, but not so specific that it eliminates competition, okay? So, for example, you want gravel. Let's just say you're going to seal bid out a gravel purchase, all right? We need rock for road purposes and we need it by this date, and that's what you publish. Well, then you get in sealed bids, and one of them is the lowest by far, okay? And now you have to take that, okay? You have no reason to think it's a problem. You accept it, and when that thing is delivered, well, they back up their truck and they dump out blue aquarium rock. It's the little pebbles in a goldfish tank. Well, that wasn't for road purposes, really, but you didn't specify, okay? And they're actual specs for the right gravel. So instead, what you would have wanted to do is publish the specs for the right size gravel, okay? On the other hand, you can't be too specific. Let's say you want a new grader, and you say it has to be green and gold and have the emblem of an antlered woodland creature. Well, that's way too specific, because now you've stopped any other color from playing in the market, okay? We can't do that. We have to say we want particular attachments, a horsepower, range, attachment, certain things you may want, maybe it's wheelbase, whatever you come up with, okay? And you can use vendors to help you aim at those characteristics, okay? But it still has to let people play in the market, okay? When you do bidding, sealed bidding like this in your specs, if you want any bonds, which are insurance, you have to put them in your specs, okay? Because you can't come in later and change it. A bid bond is, well, if they walk away from their bid, we get the cost to rebid this out, which usually isn't much for townships, okay? There's not a lot to writing the specs that we do typically. Performance is a little more important. Performance is, did you perform? In particular on a construction project. If they walk away or abscond with the money, good luck getting it back. Instead, you want to have a bond, okay, in place, and you have to ask for it up front in your specs, a bond for a particular amount. And that way, if there's an issue, you go make the claim on the bond, and the bond issuer goes and tracks down the absconding contractor. Okay, last is a payment bond. This protects you from like a general contractor not paying their subs. Okay, a general contractor is supposed to pay the subs, but if they refuse for some reason, let's say not out of the realm of possibility here, a contractor, it doesn't have the jobs they thought they would this year, and all of a sudden the contractors they owed can't get paid. Well, those folks can come back to the township and say, I did this work, pay me directly. Okay, you want a payment bond in place. These will drive up the cost of your contract. Absolutely the same as having insurance on your house and your car drives up the cost of owning those things. But we do it because it's a protection later on, and you'll be very happy you did if you ever have an issue, okay? And it doesn't even have to be ill will. Sometimes a good faith contractor just doesn't have the ability to help. They wish they did. They are out of money. They didn't run away. It's not necessarily a fault on them. Circumstances hit them, okay? You want to have protection from this, okay, even if you trust the vendor. Last, road specs you file with the clerk before soliciting them because it's required in statute. All right, opening bids. This has to be done in a public setting. Sealed bid you open in public, okay? You can't make changes or accept changes. They can't say, well, look, I made a mistake. You have to let me change this thing. Well, before you do that, instead, you stop and say, well, sorry, we got to talk to our attorney about this because changing bids is a big deal. We try not to do that, okay? And anyway, if it's a bigger contract, you don't want to award it right away, and you're not under a hurry, okay? Get them in and consider them. First, did they meet your specs? Did they give you what you asked for? Because if they didn't, even if it's better, you couldn't take it. Okay, what if they gave you an offer for that grader and it's a higher horsepower than you had in your range? Well, you'd love to take it, but you can't, okay, because it's not in your spec range. Now, with any of these, you could always reject them all and then rebid, okay? But vendors tend to get a little upset about that, right? You review them, though, okay? Make sure that they have offered the right things. And then you have to make sure they are a lowest responsible bidder. And this is a matter of law here again. If you mess this up, this is a criminal thing, okay? The town officer who violates this is guilty of a misdemeanor and must leave office. A misdemeanor is $3,000 and up to 90 days in jail. Now, I haven't seen this issue come up among any township officer, okay? But the idea is if they're the low bidder and they've provided you with the right specs, they're promising what you asked for, you have to give it to them. and this is why townships often don't like sealed bidding, you're stuck with what you're given, okay? You may hate the person. You may not like how they do business, but lowest responsible means they can deliver the work, right? As long as they can deliver it to you, doesn't matter how you feel about them, all right? Now, if you know they didn't do good work in another place, that may be a reason. You talk to your attorney and you find out if there's a good faith reason where you can say, sorry, but you're not responsible. We have examples of your work from elsewhere that we know you didn't deliver what you said you would, or you didn't come back and fix it, you didn't stand behind your work, you didn't deliver on the specs, okay? All those may be reasons, okay? But otherwise, you make sure that you award to the lowest responsible. And if you ever have a question, you call us, you call your attorney, and we slow you down, and we try to work this out to make sure that you're doing this correctly to avoid the penalty, but also just do this right and not have to rebid this thing out later, okay? Exceptions. Again, there are exceptions, okay? First exception, there's what's called the state contract, and this is something administered by the state. It is not administered by any local dealer. It's called a cooperative purchasing venture. You call up the office in St. Paul, you become part of it, and then you can choose off the menu, okay? They've already negotiated prices on things that are deemed to be fair. And this, again, goes back to public trust, okay? Buy off of that. They tell you where you're going to get it. Do not just go to the local vendor for your $200,000 grader, and they say, well, we can give it to you for state bid contract price. That's okay. No, it's not, okay? Because process is as important on this as cost, all right? So you follow the right process, go through the right office. They'll tell you where you're going to buy it from. Sorry, you don't get to choose your vendor all the time, all right? Joint powers agreement. If you're in a joint powers fire department, for example, while you're buying fire equipment, that is well above $200,000 for a new fire truck. Only one of the partners has to do all these requirements, okay? It's considered an exception. Not all of you have to go through the same thing to get it, right? A county road contract. If a county road is being done and your town road touches it, it's in the same area, you can go to the contractor and say, we'd like the same contract terms. Will you give us a contract on the same basis? And you can do that without any sealed bidding or any written quotes. It's because it's presumed the county already went through the right things because they're subject to the same laws, right? They already did it. Why should we do it again? All right, purchases between local governments or with the state and federal government are also accepted. Buy and sell among each other, that's no problem at all, okay? Last is emergencies. Again, the same definition. Imminent threat to health, welfare, safety of the public, and it couldn't have been reasonably foreseen. All right, so your plow breaks in May because you're using it for hauling rock. Well, you didn't get it fixed, and now the snow is flying in November. It's not an emergency. You needed to address that when you knew you had a problem, okay? But the plow breaks in January, absolutely, it's an emergency. Now you can go out, you could contract for service, or you go to a vendor and you buy what you need if it's not feasible to fix it, okay? So you do have that there available to you, okay? Now, we have 1 minute if I had any questions. In lieu of questions with this, remember these things we talked about, these are two big key pieces. There was a lot of content in this part 2, okay, because these are bigger laws with a lot to explain, and they both relate to public trust. And again, townships don't get in trouble with these until somebody gets upset with some decision you made, okay, or maybe they're a former board member. All right. Maybe some of you are in that township where there was a heated election. Okay, they do have heated elections sometimes, believe it or not, and somebody's upset. Now, be careful, okay, because they may come after you with the open meeting law, especially if they're an old officer. They may know these rules, okay, or the contracting law. You have to be cautious, okay. So with that, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time, and look forward to seeing you in part 3. Where we'll cover conflicts of interest, purchasing township property.
Okay, thanks, Steve, for the presentation, and to our attendees. A copy of today's presentation will be sent in a recorded format to all attendees via email, as well as a certificate of participation within about 1 to 2 hours. So be on the lookout for those materials in your emails. Thanks for everybody joining today, and thanks to Steve for the presentation. Everybody have a great Friday. Bye-bye.